Are you live streaming for
I am live. This is the Stop Protect the Planet Stop TMX.
the Facebook?
The Facebook page right now, yeah. And from Ruth's phone, I'm doing it, yeah. So today is April the 26th. We have a press conference, and we are at the what's called the tank farm.
I would take it off, like this or something. At the night when we leave tonight.
I just want to give you a heads up. There is a chance you might not be able to hear the full speaking because there's activity going on at the gate. There's a lot of big trucks coming through. So just going to give you a heads up. So it could get a bit noisy, but we're going to hope we can capture as much of the conversation as we can get. So just to give you a heads up. So, and here's the news media is here recording this press conference. So here's an example of the noise. I wish I brought my earplugs. I wish I brought earplugs. Really noisy.
And a better mask.
I know, like a bigger one. Yeah. I know. We should have a special biohazard mask from all the fumes in here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to make sure an acknowledgement. We're in the unceded land of the Coast Salish people. Today is April the 26th. This is Catherine. Christine.
I don't know how to say hummingbird.
I'd like to ask you to please share those videos, share the live feed. We want as many people to know about this as possible, so please share it. Thank you very much for being here to watch this press conference. All my relations.
Good morning. Can I get some thumbs up in the back if you can hear me okay? Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Christine Turry. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an organizer with Protect the Planet Stop TMX. And I am the MC for today's press conference. I'm grateful to meet with you all here on this beautiful Coast Salish morning. Thank you for coming. After our live statements have been issued, we will provide you with our press release of the day. So first, I'm pleased to introduce Kaya George, Kaya George Halkwean proudly carries the teaching of her Tulalip and Tsleil-Waututh nations, which have inspired her to become a young Indigenous and environmental leader, scholar, and activist. She has talked globally about climate justice and spread the teachings of her nations to honor and care for the earth while being a student at Simon Fraser University. Her pronouns are she, they.
Hot Squile, Tanoia, Pathlia, Queen Pashami, Kaya George, Queen Sna, Tanachin Clare, the Philip, Tanachin Clare, Slewatop, Asnach. Scalus Ton Man, Sitzat, Franchisha. On Hot from Squalor and Teats. Heichka, Nata Espec. I just said in my traditional language that my traditional name is Halia, my name is Kaya George. I come from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and Tsleil-Waututh tribes, and my heart is lifted today, and I give thanks to these small birds whose nests can fit in the palm of your hand for having a part in stopping a multi-billion-dollar pipeline. And thank you to the allies who have brought attention to them. When I think of the hummingbirds, I remember two things I was taught. That the animals do not have voices, so we must use our voices to stand up for the voiceless. We must use our voices in actions to spread their will. And two, that hummingbirds bring messages of good luck, and they bring messages of the future and what is to come. And I'll leave that with all of you to decide what to make of that, because I think we all know what's going to come next, and that's going to be defeating this pipeline. This pipeline that's senseless, and under Tsleil-Waututh's traditional law, we have deemed unlawful on these lands. So with that, I give thanks to these little birds who have brought so much courage and brought so much joy to our lives. And thank you to all of the supporters who have been fighting for them and fighting for all of our rights. Hi, Chika, thank you.
Of the tank farm, in case we haven't shared that yet. Thank you, Kaya. Next, it is an honor to introduce Chief Judy Wilson, Executive Board Member of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Chief Wilson has served her community for over 10 years as chief and as council member for 8 years. Chief Judy Wilson firmly believes that we must focus on the survival of all peoples. This means shifting to clean energy, not depending on fossil fuels or pipelines like TMX. Changing consumerism from big conglomerates to local foods and lifestyles, traditional food security and harvesting, and lessening our footprint on the land, along with the restoration of our lands, lakes, rivers, and oceans. In her work, Chief Judy Wilson advocates for a higher consciousness and paradigm shift in our shared history, which is the interconnection of our Mother Earth, water, and the the way we live. This conception of subjective consciousness and objective reality and their intimate connection is critical in the survival of all. I will now invite Chief Judy Wilson to speak.
Request Cook Judy Wilson, Skatzines, Weapon Ulu. I'm very honored to be here today. A lot because there's a lot of things going on our land, especially with the pipeline. I come from the Secwepemc Nation, where the pipeline's going through over 513 kilometers of our territory. And on the way down, I seen the swath of land, the trees, the devastation by our waterways and the trees all the way down. If that's not heartbreaking enough for the average citizen to see, I don't know what is. It's total destruction of Mother Earth and of our water that we all rely on. And what is it for? To bring tar sand oil, one of the largest emission polluters in the world, tar sand oil, dirty fossil fuel oil. To where and for who? We don't need it. We need to invest in greener energy, greener ways for energy and heating, and lessening the impact to Mother Earth. We're in a great shift right now, and people don't realize that in ways it's affecting us with climate change every day. We need to talk about this stuff that's going on here. It's very moving. It just raises every fiber of my being to fight more, to say no to trans man.
That's right.
Trudeau government is responsible for this.
That's right.
Trudeau government bought a pipeline when most countries are going the other way on climate change. He bought a tar sands pipeline. So he has to be accountable. Did he ask any of our citizens in Canada for your free, prior informed consent for this pipeline?
Oh, no.
He didn't have our nation's consent. He went to bands who signed for the pipeline, but not the people. The people are the collective proper title holders. Every citizen in Canada here is the ones that make decisions. The government didn't include you in that decision. If the people made a decision in Canada, would they have bought a pipeline?
No.
No way.
No way.
Everywhere I've gone, they've said, why did you guys buy a pipeline? I said, we didn't buy a pipeline. Trudeau bought a pipeline without consulting anyone.
Shame on Trudeau.
My mother is here, she's 84. She's walked the land, she lives the land, she survives off the land. She is against Trans Mountain Pipeline. She's done a lot for the water and missing murdered women. My sister Della Powder there's the same, and my sister Joanne Buffalo as well. So there's thousands and thousands of other women, there's thousands and thousands of other Indigenous people walking the earth, walking to protect the water. And we're not going to give up protecting the land. And we're here to honor Anna's hummingbirds that used to migrate, but they're here. They made their home here. These are their homelands. We respect all of the beings on the land. They're creation. They're the creation that are here. And they're working very hard as in those ancestral stories of origins to protect the forest, to protect the lands, and we need to honor that. When the hummingbirds are here, they ensure that we are in a very safe ecological, biological diversity. If the hummingbirds are gone, there's a big problem we have, because they're the pollinators, they're the ones that are keeping the balance and the harmony on our land, and they're the indicators for that. If we're not watching how these things are being eradicated off this earth, there's a lot of animals that in extinction now because of the global climate warming and climate change. And what is leading that is the dirty oil, fossil fuel and oil. It's tar sand oil leading that. So we have to change that path. And if the Trudeau government doesn't want to change it, then the people have to stand up and change it. Any walk of life, any background you come from, together we are stronger. Together we can lead the changes. Like our youth, Kaya here, all the work she does. It's not positions that we are paid for or do. We're doing it because it's in our heart. It's in our DNA. It's in our love for Mother Earth. It's in the teachings. Her grandmother, Amy George, is a tremendous, tremendous woman. I went out on the ocean with her in canoes on Mother's Day. That's how we spent our Mother's Day 50 years ago. And we put red ochre down. And I'm here to say it. I'm here to protect them. So we're delayed till August 20th, so we've got to make good use of that time. We've got to be on the land the best way we can. We've got to be on social media the best way we can. We've got to be at every concert we can. The hummingbirds are calling us. It's time now. We got to get serious. We got to be able to put every fiber of our being to stop Trans Mountain Pipeline. The hummingbird's message to us, no matter what living room you're sitting in, what subway you're on, or what travels you're on this, wherever you are today, the messages from the hummingbirds are stop Trans Mountain and do everything you can, just like they did in the stories of origins. They didn't give up. They carried the water in their beaks to put the fire out. They let the animals know what was going on. They're showing us the way on this. Let's not give up on our hummingbirds today. Let's carry the hummingbird's message. Let's continue this and let's work together. Let's put every effort we have in changing the course of history, the course of mankind, because Trudeau can't do it, we'll do it. Let's stand.
Woo!
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Donna Clark. She goes by the pronouns she, her, and Donna is a founding member of the Communityness Funding Network.
Woohoo! Donna!
She was a board member of the Wild Bird Trust of BC for almost 4 years. Donna is a retired Burnaby high school teacher. She is passionate about her responsibility to protect these lands and waters for current and future generations as part of her existence on this beautiful planet, and in particular, these lands and waters. Donna.
Hey.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on these lands and waters. I'm very grateful as of today, as always. The Community Nest Finding Network is a group of volunteers who find and monitor bird nests that are threatened by the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. Members include registered biologists, bird nest surveyors, nature educators, bird watchers, bird photographers, and even arborists. We formed in February of this year after learning that Trans Mountain planned to cut down thousands of trees without permits in the city of Burnaby.
Shame.
It's really bothering me
Our
that
first
person that
nest
lost my
that
car.
was found on March 15th under the
Always
last
push the button.
tree
Please.
certification. The protectors of the birds in the city has for more than 130 days to defend the trees, lands, and waters against Trans Mountain. In the last 6 weeks, our network has found and sound pollution here from these trucks coming and going is very hard. In the last 6 weeks, our network has found and documented more than a dozen active nests along the pipeline route. And we know there are hundreds of more nests that have not been species of plants and animals, including red-listed species, are currently in danger because of Trans Mountain's plan to continue active tree cutting in the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley throughout nesting season, not to mention all the way up the pipeline to Edmonton. Active bird nests are federally protected under the Migratory Bird Convention Act, and it is a crime to destroy or disturb a nest. We've already lost 70% of birds in the last 30 years in North America. Enough is enough. When are we going to stop this insanity? It's difficult to stomach that such a threat to birds, ecosystems, and our climate is the result of the pipeline paid for by tax dollars. The federal government's own data has shown it's not even needed.
Sure.
At the local level, we are trying to protect these birds. At the national level, we believe moving forward with expanding the tar sands is equally criminal to global commons, to birds, and future generations. The Community Nest Finding Network implores that Trans Mountain cease and desist all cutting and heavy machinery use until the close of the bird nesting window in August. Well, I would say forever. At least until bird nesting season is over, and beyond. Trans Mountain will likely discount its own delays and say that this is not a problem. But why should we trust their spoken word when their own progress reports show delays in almost all segments of the route? And at last, but certainly not least, it is absolutely outrageous that bird nests are protected by the federal law, and yet sovereign Indigenous nations are criminalized and arrested, often with excessive violence, when trying to protect their own land.
Shame.
As a settler, I'm disgusted.
Shame.
Ecocide and genocide are one and the same, and when it comes to fossil fuel extraction, the tar sands is the most destructive oil project on the earth, and the science is clear, the people are clear. This heavy crude must stay in the ground. Shame. Shame on Trudeau for his ongoing doublespeak about climate leadership. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Donna. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Sarah Ross. Goes by the pronouns she, her.
Yes.
Sarah is also a founding member of the Community Nest Finding Network. Sarah has been paying attention to birds for her entire life. She takes seriously her obligation to be a good guest on these unceded territories by taking direct action to protect all beings. Sarah is a nature educator, and birds are her favorite subject. Sarah.
Woohoo! Yay, Sarah!
Good morning. My name is Sarah Ross. I'm a founding member of the Community Nest Finding Network. Thank you for joining us. So, about noon on April 12th, as a member of the Community Nest Finding Network, I accompanied federal wildlife officers into Trans Mountain's active worksite alongside the Brunette River Conservation Area in so-called Burnaby. Before I tell you that story, though, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how our network operates. So the Community Nest Finding Network, we go into the forest. Usually it's dawn, it's quiet, it's beautiful, and we go into the forest to look for birds. Right now, birds are building nests. They're in the bushes, they're on the ground, they're in the trees. birds are singing, and trucks are driving. So I'm just going to pause. I'd say listen to the birds, but it's hard to hear them with the trucks.
Good one, you.
I was talking about the birds. So right now the birds are building nests. They're building nests on the ground, they're building nests in the bushes, they're building nests in the trees, they're building nests all over. They're singing, they're forming relationships, they're gathering nesting materials, they're incubating eggs. So we go in patiently and we sit and we watch and we listen. And gradually the birds reveal their nests to us.
Wow. So noisy here.
So gradually the birds reveal their nest to us as we patiently pay attention in this way to the birds and their lives in the forest. So as any team of biologists would do, we carefully record our field observations, we take GPS coordinates, we photo document nests or nesting materials, and we have been sharing our findings to protect these birds, to protect the environment, keep these birds safe. We share nest information directly with Trans Mountain. And I should say that Trans Mountain does conduct their own nesting surveys. However, for some reason, they don't seem to be finding many nests. Certainly not all of them. So back to April 12th, the scene of the crime, the scene of the reckless disregard for environmental regulations. Several days earlier, our network had discovered a hummingbird nest that we feared was at great risk because the Trans Mountain chainsaws were coming closer and the heavy machinery was coming closer to her nest. And I'm just going to pause this exciting moment while some Trans Mountain dump trucks come into the site.
There's two of them coming, another one.
I had a fantasy they'd stop their trucks because they didn't want it to be seen by the press, but that's what business is doing. All right, so back to the day. Here comes another one. I'm going to talk over. So we documented a nest that we thought was at high risk because Trans Mountain's chainsaws and heavy machinery were quickly approaching. The moments of that day are stuck in my mind. It was a very dynamic situation. On our way in with the wildlife officers, we stopped to admire several of the other active hummingbirds' nests on the route. And you could just see the little mamas sitting there, tiny on their tiny, tiny little nests. But as we approached the active cut line, we witnessed a tree falling in the very area where the hummingbird's nest was located. And at that moment, the wildlife officer ordered the work to be stopped, and directly we went in. We were able to locate the branch, with the broken branch with the nest still on it, laying on the ground, destroyed, no sign of the mama hummingbird or her eggs. Federal wildlife officers are now able to enforce the law to protect these nests with Trans Mountain. thanks to our clear observations and reports, work has been stopped on this site until August 21st. So all birds will be safe for now on that site. The Community Nest Finding Network is here to protect these birds. We're also here to protect the planet. And let me be clear, we are only doing this work because no one else is. When the government is the owner as well as the regulator, it means that groups like ours are imperative. Our members have confirmed 8 active nests on this site alone, but there are hundreds, likely thousands of nests along the 1,500-kilometer pipeline route. Even today, tree cutting and pipeline construction continues without adequate government monitoring or protection, and with Trans Mountain in reckless disregard of environmental laws. The Community Nest Finding Network is frankly uplifted by the recent surge in interest in nest finding from across the province, and particularly in areas where Trans Mountain is against the recommendations of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Trans Mountain continues to cut during active nesting season. Our volunteers will continue to watch and monitor closely, collaborating as appropriate to keep birds safe in the midst of what is an extinction crisis, a crisis which is obviously made worse in myriad ways by the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and to the whole Community Nest Finding Network for their amazing grassroots work.
We love you.
And of course for the hummingbirds.
Yeah.
So our final speaker today is Eugene Kung, pronouns he, him. Eugene is a staff lawyer with West Coast Environmental Law, working on tar sands, pipelines and tankers, as well as with RE-Law. He is committed to human rights, social and environmental justice, and has been working to stop the Trans Mountain expansion project.
Thank you very much, Christine. Thank you to the speakers and everyone for joining us here today. I was just reflecting that just over 3 years ago, around this time, was when construction was paused by Trans Mountain, and they entered into negotiations that ultimately resulted in Canada purchasing the pipeline back in May 2018 when it was announced. And it's hard sitting here, watching these trucks go by on the site where so much resistance has happened over the years, and so much energy has happened with that watch house just down the road. And reflecting back on that time, and part of the reason for me that it's so upsetting and frustrating and hard to kind of think about is because that was the day that Canada really fell deeply into becoming a petro-state by owning and being responsible for the construction of this pipeline, but also for the regulation and enforcement of the laws that are supposed to protect the areas that are impacted from the pipeline. That day, a lot of that hope died, what was left of it anyway. And what we've seen since, in the last 3 years, and since construction started for 2 years, I'm just going to keep going with this truck here, is unfortunately today is a continuation of a pattern of disregard for the very laws that we were all promised that this project was going to be subject to. 157 conditions that the National Energy Board recommended and that the Cabinet accepted, which we were told were legally binding and that we're going to address all the concerns, the thousands of concerns that were raised by tens of thousands of people engaged in the process. And of course, what we saw was the exact opposite. One of the first things that Trans Mountain did was to go to the CER, the Canadian Energy Regulator, who replaced the National Energy Board, and asked for relief or to be excused from condition number 2 of the 157 conditions. Condition number 2 basically says that Trans Mountain will live up to the commitments it made during the regulatory process, which includes following local laws. And we know, of course, that that was related to this area right here, where Trans Mountain felt that Burnaby's bylaws that protect trees, Burnaby's requirements for permits to cut down trees where that was seen as necessary, that was too inconvenient for Trans Mountain to meet its schedule, construction schedule. And that construction schedule was needed to move quickly because there had already been delays thanks to some court cases. But the reality is that the further this gets delayed, the more expensive it becomes, and the farther it falls outside of the public interest. And we are so far from that today that it's almost shocking to that we even have to have a press conference like this. Because what we've seen, as I said, is a pattern of disregard for the rules, a disregard for the conditions that were meant to protect this area, from the spawning mats that were put in illegally to prevent fish spawning a number of years ago. More recently, the COVID-19 workplace violations that caused a shutdown here of almost 2 months. And now what we're seeing is a disregard for the requirements to look for nests of migratory species like these beautiful, powerful, and amazing hummingbirds. And I just really want to hold my hands up to the locals, local community members from the Community Nest Finding Network for being here, being the eyes and ears on the ground, for alerting the federal authorities. So they had no choice but to see as they witnessed and caught Trans Mountain red-handed destroying a tree that contained an active hummingbird nest. Now, unfortunately, this is not probably going to be the last time that we're talking about Trans Mountain skirting the rules in an attempt to try and keep to their schedule. It's probably not the last time that we're going to be speculating about the construction costs ballooning. I estimate it's over $20 billion at this point, but of course we don't know because they won't tell us. They haven't updated us in more than a year since it was $12.6 billion.
That's right. Shame.
And what I actually expect, and as we heard, is for Trans Mountain to downplay this delay, to make it seem like it was part of their plan all along. And what will even likely happen is that they'll go back to the CER and ask to be excused from obeying yet another law. So we need to be aware of this pattern that's happening quietly. Many people are not paying attention. There's a lot of stuff going on in our lives. But this is happening. This is not the first time. Unfortunately, it won't be the last. We know that Trans Mountain is trying to hide right now. It's the names of its insurers, increasing this culture of secrecy that it inherited first from Kinder Morgan, who then inherited it from him. So I'm just incredibly proud to be here today with these committed community representatives, Indigenous leadership, and youth. And I really want to encourage you to celebrate these moments. We currently have a pause of the construction of this area until August 21st.
Let's pause.
We'll see how long that lasts and how Trans Mountain tries to but in the meantime, I take a lot of inspiration from these little hummingbirds. They're so beautiful, they're so powerful, the way they move around so quietly and efficiently, it just is huge inspiration. So thank you again for joining, thank you for the organizers, thank you to the bird finders, and thank you to the hummingbirds.
Yay! Woohoo!
Thank you, Eugene. So, thank you to everyone who's tuning in right now, everyone who's come along, hands up. Thank you to all of our allies who have made everything that we do possible. For those who are standing up and saying, yeah, Petro State is not the future that we want. There is no future in a dead planet. So at this time, we can take some questions. For our media colleagues present, we do have copies of our press release. And I'd just like to say Many thanks to everyone here, and let's stop TMX. Are there any questions from the press? I'd like to extend the offering to Chief Judy to close us properly.
Cook's Jam, thank you for all the powerful words and sentiments and commitments to stand behind hummingbirds here in Burnaby. Just like our Indigenous people have inherent fronting rights, and we have land rights here in BC, the hummingbirds have nature rights.
That's right.
And we can't forget that. We have to stand behind those nature rights and uphold them just as strongly as we uphold our Indigenous and Maritime rights for land rights in BC. I wanted to acknowledge our Grand Chief Stuart Phillip. He's been a strong advocate and very vocal on Trans Mountain. And our Vice President, Chief Don Thomas, the Union of BC Big Chiefs, for their leadership over the many, many years. And of course, to standing up for AB and CEDA, all the tremendous work they do. And I wanted to be able to say, in closing off, we wanted to do the Women's Warrior Song, because my traditional name is Red Hummingbird Woman.
Oh, yes!
So my mother and my sisters, Bella and Joanne, are here. They're going to come forward and do the women hummingbirds. With their eggs and protecting them just as much as our women protect our children. The hummingbirds are protecting their babies, their eggs, and their children. So we want to do an honor song for them.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Woo! This is awesome. We're gonna have the Women Warrior song, you guys. This is a sacred song, the Women Warrior song. So enjoy. What a beautiful way to close the press conference.
Not your average press conference.
I love your average one. Look at it, it's so beautiful. Oh, I'm gonna move that way. Excuse me. Sorry, Thomas. I'm gonna stand here for a minute here. There we go. Oh, that's good. But both of them, I love it.
Sing along if you guys want to. Ask my sister Bella to lead us off in a good way. Yeah, and she said everybody should know this song.
I love the bird behind them is gorgeous. I love it. Okay. Hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, hey, 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 yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, hey, 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 yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, hey, 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 yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, hey, yah-hee-oh, hey, 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 yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, yah-hee-oh, yah-hee-oh, hey, yah-hee-oh. Turn it off.